We are part of the problem. Of course we know this. It would be hypocritical of us to deny that and yet take part in what is assuredly a slow degradation of a proud and beautiful city. And this is why I left Venice with a tinge of sadness, but with a bittersweet longing for a return. First things first, why Venice and not Volterra? Well, it was a significant birthday for Niamh, and she shopped around for a holiday and chose Venice as her destination. We'd been there for about 7 hours in 2010, and watching live walks in it during the pandemic whetted our appetites, particularly those uploaded by the YouTube channel I Love You Venice. We flew Ryanair but didn't opt for Fast Track. We regretted that at first as the queue snaked all the way back to its opening, but it actually moved quite nicely and we were only in it for maybe 15 minutes. There was a slight delay to takeoff which was made up during flight time, and when we landed, the temperatures, it was 22 to 23, whereas Ireland hadn't gotten higher than 14 and was still frequently in single digits. I was really feeling the jacket I was wearing. Anyway, we navigated our way past the first Vaporetto ticket booth to the docks, where the booth was empty. We bought tickets for the Vaporetto, went to Dock 12, and then queued. A larger Vaporetto was boarded by those waiting in the dock next to ours, and they too seemed to be going to Rialto, so I was beginning to get a little squirmy. The Vaporetto filled and left. Then, a few minutes later, a smaller version came to our dock and our queue started moving, but it took 2 further boats to enable us to get on board. All part of the process, I guess. In fairness, they weren't long in coming. We boarded and had to wrestle our handheld luggage down the stairs. I stupidly chose a row of seats beside the life preserver, so I'd nowhere to put my case safe between my legs for the hour-long ride. 10 minutes in, I realised that we were banking a lot. This is due to the fact that there are actual lanes demarked in the bay and traffic rules are to be obeyed. I guess it makes total sense given the amount of watercraft in the area. We breezed past a few islands, only making a stop at one, I think, before making it to the Grand Canal. We had our first wow moments there. The weather was perfect, the best weekend they'd had to date that year. Everywhere you turned was a Canaletto painting. It's a remarkable looking place. hit our stop at Rialto Bridge and set about finding our hotel. There were plenty of people about, but crowds were not the foremost thing on our minds. We were keen on finding our place, dumping our bags, finding a light bite and going on to explore. I've heard many people in videos say don't bother with Google Maps. Maybe this is down to our provider. We only had occasional signal issues with our location darting about the map as a result, but by and large we found maps to be reasonably usable under Vodafone, not sponsored. Not as packed as I thought it would be, thank God. Still, everywhere is pretty busy. We found our hotel, me noting a couple of gelateria on the way, without much fuss, in less than 10 minutes. We stayed in the Rosa Salva, a small boutique hotel not too far from St. Mark's Square on a quiet enough laneway. Note that everything we mention by name will have a link to it in the description box below. This hotel is associated with a small chain of pasticceria and gelateria, and there was no breakfast, but we had some free food and drink in the room fridge and a discount voucher for their stores, one of which was right next door. Once we checked in, we ran out and came across a really cute little cicchetteria, Il Salato di San Marco. I tried the famed creamed cod. It was terribly fishy. I took a second bite and then it didn't seem quite so bad. And the third and fourth are actually quite pleasant. Give it a go, but push past that first mouthful. We came back to this place the next night. There was a table of 6 next to us and the kitchen bar had prepared squid ink risotto, and we were the only other people there. The place is tiny. Rather than see us go without food, they gave us half a plate between us to try. It's a wonderful example of Italian hospitality. We chatted briefly with the locals and it was just one of those special moments. First time for cicchetti. I can smell that bacala already. Happy birthday, Niamh. We had a wander, and of course, Venice blew our minds. Let me get one thing straight. Venice is an explorer's dream. There's always an excitement reaching another junction which involved a canal, and you always know everywhere would be Instagrammable. Wander down narrow laneways away from the main arteries, and if you're lucky you'll find a secluded square with a bar or restaurant with few tourists and surprisingly low prices. A quiet square, would you believe? And there we go. And the other side of Venice, more common side, people's everywhere. We had a gelato on the southeast side of the bridge, meh, and then, girding our loins, crossed it. We hit the Rialto Bridge once during the stay, well twice because we had to cross back, and avoided it for the rest of the trip. It was teeming, and even then it wasn't high season. I shudder to think what it's actually like then. Oh, too many people. It's really the only way to get across the Grand Canal unless you hire a traghetto. Actually, if you do hire a traghetto, you also get the gondola experience for about €2 a person, albeit for a much shorter duration. It just ferries you across the canal. Famous Rialto Bridge. Rammers, but not as busy as I've seen it on videos in high season. Here's the money shot.
And the other side of it is just as easy.
Meydanın adı neydi ya? Meydanın adı neydi? Hayır, bulursak en azından sorarız bir şey. Ya var ya, demek ki fotoğraf falan çekiyor.
We hit the Grand Canal walkways a bit, checking out the bridge and profile. Look, it's gorgeous from that angle and a must-see when you're in Venice. In fact, I'd find it difficult to believe that any visitor, particularly a first-time one, would never go near it.
One of the quieter squares, but still busy with stalls.
Then it was off to the piazza at the far end of the fish market for a sit-down drink. The market was being hosed down and the drinks were fine. The smell of fish assailed our nostrils from time to time, not necessarily a good companion to Aperol. We went back to the hotel to have a bit of a rest. On the way back we stopped off at an off-the-beaten-track Carnevale mask maker. Niamh picked one out to add to her mask collection in Volterra.
One or two stalls still left out.
We had begun gung-ho with plans to stay out till dinner time, but the early start got the better of us and we headed back up. The room was warm and we didn't actually ask the receptionist to reduce the heat until the next day. There's a mini heat wave over much of Italy that weekend, so we were very lucky. We'd gotten a recommendation for a restaurant from a sommelier friend and walked out that evening, more than a bit naively, when we found that it was booked out. We managed to book it for the next night, which was Niamh's birthday, so it worked out beautifully. Anyway, there are a couple of other places nearby, and this takes me to a little tip section on selecting restaurants in Venice, and in much of Italy, to be honest, if you're a foodie. If you're happy to chuck any old muck into it, no judgment, honest, then you can ignore them. 1. Generally don't go for does-it-all restaurants unless you have family with you. If you want a chance at good pizza, go to a pizzeria. If you want good pasta and mains, go to a regular restaurant. 2. A menu with 200 things on it. Sometimes they can surprise you, but quality is inevitably going to suffer here. 3. A menu in the window translated into 5 languages. 4. A menu in the window with photos that are supposed to represent the food on the menu. 5. Restaurants which have people hired specifically to entice you into the restaurant. Ugh, I hate this. Go for smaller family-run places. If you can find a handwritten menu of the day, then you've probably hit the jackpot if you're after local specialties.
Well, the gondola's gone to bed. Oh yeah. That's where we ate the very first time we came to Venice, 10-15 years ago, to our shame.
All that said, we broke one of these rules and went to Il Calice, a pizzeria with a small menu and other plates. They had some really lovely looking pizza by the sliced squares. We weren't in the mood for pizza and so opted to go upstairs to the cafe style restaurant and ordered from the menu instead. We had a fab salumi plate to share with a delicious chunky piccalilli. So far so good. Sadly, the pasta dishes weren't great. Niamh had a pasta amatriciana and I had gnocchi in a white ragu. Niamh's pasta was undercooked but the sauce wasn't bad. My gnocchi were definitely overcooked and the sauce was okay, but it was very soupy. In fact, had it been served as a soup, I wouldn't have minded. After the meal, we wound our way to St. Mark's Square through the little local maze and sat opposite the Doge's palace and people watched. Of course, we had to dodge the rose sellers and the hawkers of those helicopter kids' toys thingies.
Piazza San Marco. Blissfully quiet. Apart from hawkers and only a fraction of the tourists you'd normally find on the road, on the square, I should say. £15 for a cup of coffee? I don't know about that. It's a long way up. It's impressive. There's no two ways about it. Not one, oh, no, not one bulb's probably let go out, or at least waves not for too long. A couple of gaps.
When we'd had enough, we'd walked along the Grand Canal and, quite by accident, found Harry's Bar, the birthplace of beef carpaccio and the Bellini cocktail. We had to do the touristy thing here. It was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Yet, we paid €22 each per teeny Bellini. Peaches were not yet in season, but it was fresh pulp nonetheless. However, to me, it tasted a little like cardboard box. They were serving food in there that did smell quite yummy though. We were fed enough though, and instead headed back to the hotel as we knew we'd have a day of being on our feet tomorrow. Day 2, which is Niamh's birthday, was really excellent throughout. We walked our feet off, but we had a wonderful tour of the Doge's Palace and amazing food. I had a horrible time of it during COVID. Most of us did, in fairness. And so, like many, my mental health deteriorated catastrophically. While I was building myself back up, I loved to watch travel videos, which included a type of long-format video in which the host takes you on a live explore. One of these channels on YouTube is I Love You Venice. It's less active now than it used to be, as guides are now active again post-COVID. Anyway, one of the hosts was Igor Skomparin. I always loved his upbeat style, and his knowledge of Venice is superb, so as part of Niamh's birthday present, I organised a skip-the-line tour of Doge's Palace and the cathedral for a few hours that morning. First, we asked the receptionist to turn our room temperature to 20 Celsius, and then breakfast. We made use of our voucher and had pastries and hot drinks next door to the hotel. Really delicious, I have to say, no complaints there. And there were a few good locals present too, which is always a good sign. We had a small walkabout and then met Igor just off the hotel lobby. He showed us exactly how close we were to St. Mark's Square, much closer than any route we had previously taken. Then it was our time to fly past the baffled people in the queue and enter the palace courtyard.
We got the Pope on the way. Pope
Oh,
will
do you?
be-
Oh, is he coming here? Because he's not
20
well.
He's not well at all.
Yeah.
So he's arriving here on the 27th, 28th of April. They even decide the security situation. So they block it off, the Doge's Palace, so you cannot buy the tickets online. We started as a castle because we needed to protect the... It wasn't a king, actually. It was more like a duke.
I won't harp on about the place, suffice to say it's incredible. The artworks, stairways, ceilings are out of this world and a must-see. The floors and arcades are uneven in places due to age and subsidence.
The itinerary that we're doing exactly right now, we need to impress the ambassador and tell them, look,
Right.
we are the ruler. We are the one that are supporting everything. There we go. That we're slowly starting to see the Venetian terrazzo. Ciao, buona giornata. Down this way. But before that, we start with the idea of the ambassador. The legend wants that Mr. Casanova.
Unfortunately, I was asked to stop filming by one of the attendants at one stage, which was a pity, as I saw others film unpunished. My footage here is limited.
Somebody's walking by, you feel the movement. Yeah, you got some specific areas that you and it must be in this way. So, no videos.
Okay. Also housed here is one of the most impressive displays of medieval armaments I've ever seen. The Doge's Palace is amazing, and there are other ways you can skip the queue by ordering tickets online. You should be able to Google them easily.
Palace. Where the little tiny window is, that one is the canal.
Yeah. So where those ladies are is the bridge, is it?
See, not mind the head here
Yeah.
and there because
We're not that tall.
So no,
yes, but sometimes you feel it. Don't believe me.
no hair either, so...
It's okay. It's worse for you because you don't have any protections or any cushions.
Yeah.
The prisons that has been in use until 1920, 1922.
So we're on the bridge now itself at the moment. It's a bridge of size.
Here we go. That was the glimpse. The last glimpse, so that is like, this is the end. And 1922, we were discussing 1992 over there. Oh, you got something that is in pencil, and you can see that it's totally old style actually. Some of them they are super cool actually.
It's
You're not that tall, but
oh, okay, so you to watch
this
this
one
one.
is small.
Yeah. When did it finish being a prison?
1920, 1922. Without me, that's better. 530 people. We would have had two buckets in the middle of the room. And they would have been dumped every now and then, but it was more than.
So how many, that's one room, and that would have fit 15 to 20?
15, 20, 25,
Oh my
depends
God.
actually. But at the real beginning, they were totally decorated with wood. And so you was stepping in, it's like, that's not bad, it's pretty warm and nice. But behind the wood, you would have had termites, bugs, so that they would have sucked your blood. And during summertime, actually, it was so hot. I mean, 20, 30 people that the humans, it was like a sardine.
Yeah.
Well, you would wear just like underwear. And as you can see, it's impossible to escape from here.
Yeah.
Even because you are, you would have had actually one way in, one way out. And the entire building of the prison would have been totally surrounded. Oh, wait a second, look at this. Graffitos that has been done by the prisoners through the years. But the next one is going to find the head. But the next one is just phenomenal. Look at this. Francesco Sforza, 1390. Yeah, that is cool. Even this one.
They had tools to carve all that with.
See, they would have had small tools. We got a section of the prisons that is not open to the public.
Right.
He was an artist that he was working with Tintoretto, that he was in prison, and he drew basically San Sebastian and Jesus crucified. It's like a masterpiece of art. And look at this one. We pop in a second, and that's a cell. The researches that we're doing is this. So the majority of the archaeologists or anything similar, they're coming this way. Here we go, look, 1934, 34, 1935, 1933. But that's exactly how they do the research at the moment. They got a little lamp and they check all
Painstakingly go through.
The girl, she's a friend of mine actually, and as she's doing the catalog of everything, she spent 5 years just to do a small book actually. So
It's funny sometimes where I grew up on a farm, and one of our outhouses
go ahead, so you can get the
one of our outhouses has a wooden beam roof, and from my father's and his father's
the other side of the bridge.
right, their name and just the date and stuff. So we have stuff in that's 1930s, 1940s, but still like it's like people. It's just like nature.
what we find again fun, interesting is that we do have wood, some of the
Afterwards, we had a quickish stop at the cathedral.
mainly because all the mosaics idea is arriving from amazing. The true pulpit, the true pulpit where the priest would have done the preach. Actually, there are something irregularly completely. And
I've wanted to see the mosaic Christ as I've wanted to see versions in Cefalù and Ravenna. The cathedral itself looks a little Eastern Orthodox, unusual for this far north in Italy, I would have thought. There were golden mosaics everywhere. It was incredible. The Christ at the back of the cathedral is a stupendous work. However, it was then that I began to notice things. It was pointed out that the floor was uneven and parts of it were actually in small waves. So few people were looking anywhere else but up. I began to realise that people were here for the sake of being here and mentally box-ticking while the cathedral was dying in front of their eyes, and that we were part of the problem. This was confirmed by the sadness I felt when Igor told me that the Venice Council were thinking of allowing cruise ships back. He told us that although 50,000 people were registered to live in Venice, only 36,000 did so, and the number of visitors that they have a year is 36 million. That is insane. What made me saddest of all, however, is that he was once asked by a tourist what time Venice closed at, as if it was Disneyland. After that, I tried to make a concerted effort to be more aware of my surroundings as I walked. I acknowledged each water cistern I passed, and noted whether or not it had a little cat bowl carved nearby for the cats who used to keep the rat population under control. Looking out for a little more graffiti. Checking out the interior of smaller restaurants as we passed by them, and even trying to listen in on a conversation or two.
It's stunning.
Anyway, I can't recommend Igor highly enough for a tour. I'll leave his details in the description box below. Do consider him if you want a special tour to yourselves. At the end of the tour, we asked him for a recommendation for somewhere to go to lunch, and he gave us criteria selection, and we finally settled on Osteria Olivanera, which served good food and was in a quiet neighbourhood, and the selection was bang on. We both had deep-fried stuffed zucchini flowers. Niamh followed that up with lasagna, while I had the best pasta dish I would have in Venice, a bigoli pasta with anchovies and onion sauce. Amazing.
Venice's leaning tower. Everything looks leaning in wide view, but trust me, it's leaning.
Out of pure coincidence, I checked the map to see if I could find the famous Libreria Acqua Alta. I was hoping to see if I could employ the doctrine of mindful tourism here, but my God, it was arguably one of the most disappointing things we did in Venice. Now, this is no discredit to the owners and the runners of the bookshop. Had Venice been a normal, functional city serving its population, it would still no doubt be frequented as a nice, quirky bookshop with a decent stock of new and antiquarian volumes. What greeted us were two circular queues, one to enter and leave by, separate doors, and then one at the bottom of the shop, past the mini gondola filled with books, is another circle where you got to climb the steps made of books and take a photo as quickly as possible and climb down the other side. Always on the move. I've never felt more like a shepherded animal. Afterwards, we stopped in a large square which contained the old famous hospital St. Giovanni e Paolo. One of the Rosa Salva bars associated with a hotel for which we had a discounting voucher was there, but this one also had artisanal gelato, so we indulged, and it was really nice and needed.
It is. It is a hospital.
Like you want a pizza?
We got back to the hotel and in satisfaction at the coolness, and had an hour's rest before we headed out to Niamh's birthday celebration meal at our sommelier friend's recommendation, Osteria da Carla. It's a nice, intimate place with excellent food. We had an aperitivo each and both ordered a glass of wine. For starters, Niamh had tortelloni, capellacci as they were called on the menu, stuffed with rabbit, and I had deep fried sardines. Afterwards, I had linguine with clams and bottarga. The clams were already out of their shells, so I could have at them immediately. It was a beautiful plate of pasta, but I think I'd give the nod just about to the anchovy dish I'd had earlier. Niamh's, however, was a pure winner. Iberico pork fillet wrapped in bacon, perfectly cooked, a little pink in the middle and tender. Desserts, Niamh had fancy tiramisu, and I had a wonderfully inventive homemade cream egg where the white was ricotta and the yellow pureed mango. Delish. For our last day, we'd be heading to Burano rather than the more busy Murano. The sun was blazing again and we had a perfect day out. We hit the north side of the city to board at the Fontane Nove stops and got the number 12 to the islands. I was told that you buy the tickets aboard, but nobody came to check or ask us, so we rode over free of charge. This trip maybe took 40 or 50 minutes. To compensate, there were ticket machines at the Burano dock, so we bought return tickets there. Our consciences remained intact.
Colourful Isle of Burano, home to fishermen for hundreds of years. And now tons of pretty houses, squid ink, pasta, and risotto, and frito misto. Let's have an owl look.
We stopped off at a bar near the jetty and each bought a bottle of water, and then proceeded into town. There are places you go to which the camera doesn't do any justice. The panoramic views surrounding Volterra is an example, and another one is Burano. We simply couldn't get over how beautiful it is. The blue skies really brought out the best in the multicoloured buildings lining the streets. Everywhere you looked gave you potential for taking a postcard shot. Even the crowds, not that it was packed, couldn't detract too much from its loveliness.
Videos don't do it justice.
Comunque, se sapevamo buttare un sumo, buttare là.
It's just ridiculously pretty.
Anche il troppo, è già un po' sì, il pratico lo stavo guardando.
If we spot a proper gelateria, I might indulge.
We stopped briefly for gelato, which was pretty tasty, and explored a bit more. If there's one slightly negative thing I'd have to say is that there's a lack of rubbish bins until you hit the periphery of the island.
Cute little walks and places to sit, and grass. And trash cans, which are very rare actually in the middle of the village. So you might have to come to the outside to deposit of any trash you have.
Pretty little lanes and streets were everywhere, and Burano, being famous for its lace, had its fair share of fabric shops. Soon it was lunchtime, and we found a place that had just opened for the day, Ristorante Riva Rosa. Rosa featured a lot in this mini break. We luckily got a seat outside and ordered drinks and then a couple of courses. I tried a fancy version of the creamed cods with what looked like prawn crackers tinted by squid ink. They were yum, but I had to get past that first mouthful again, but it was lovely afterwards. Niamh had scallops and shells, which she enjoyed. After, I had spaghetti alla vongole, clams. At this time they were little lads, and all of them in their shells, so I removed them all before tucking in. I'm not sure if you do it piecemeal or all at once. Let me know in the comments. Anyway, I was pleased that the dish was still pleasantly warm by the time I'd finished my surgery. Niamh had more scallops for second, this time with gnocchi. It's not easy to see in these photos. We explored the island a little more afterwards, noting that it too had a leaning bell tower.
It's almost oriental.
On our way in, we had seen a long wooden bridge span Burano and the island of Mazzorbo. So we took the bridge over there, and it was like a little oasis of peace and quiet. We hardly saw another soul. There are a couple of nice restaurants near the dock, but there's not much else. However, that's not the point. The point is to be able to break away from the crowd elsewhere.
It seems a bit more gentrified, more countrified, ruralised. Whatever way we've to say it.
We had debated about going on to Torcello and Murano on the way back, but instead we'd leave them for a subsequent visit. We caught the Vaporetto from Mazzorbo. Note that if you do this, you will most likely be standing all the way home to Venice. The stewards opening and closing the gates in the craft can be quite authoritarian, so get quickly on and quickly off when you need to. When we stopped towards the end of the ride home at Murano, a couple must have dilly-dallied around whether to disembark. The lady in charge of the gates was halfway through closing them and absolutely refused to let them off. They were on a strict deadline. We got back and made a move towards the hotel. Rather than taking the main roads, we snuck about the narrower streets and alleys and eventually came across a little square with a path in and a path out opposite. In the square were a gorgeous-looking ivy-coloured restaurant, a bar which was also serving nibbles, this particular neighbourhood's well, and the well's cat. It was idyllic. We ordered spritzes at the bar and got chatting to a lovely Welsh couple who were operating under the same open-ended itinerary and timeline we were. Soon, the rest of the tables were grabbed by other British couples. We ordered another spritz and a plate of gyoza, of all things. They were tasty enough. The waiter explained where all the produce came from, including the soy sauce, which I found a little amusing. The cat then provided lots of oohs and ahs from passing tourists, some of whom stopped to take a photo when it jumped on top of the well and started cleaning itself. But soon it was time to move on, and we walked back to the hotel and rested a while. Later that evening we sought a place to go for dinner. Instead of taking a recommendation, we had a stroll about the town looking for nice, intimate locations. We'd found a couple, but the menu wasn't quite to our taste. In the end, we threw caution to the wind and shattered all 5 of our rules and found ourselves in Al Teatro Goldoni, a tourist restaurant. When I looked at the menu, I realised I'd been craving 2 things. Veggies, I'd had so little of them thus far in Venice, and a deep-fried breaded thing, be it fish, pork or chicken. I satisfied one craving with the soup that I would swear came out of a Knorr carton with added chilli oil. Still, it sort of did the trick. Niamh, on the other hand, ordered a beef carpaccio, and in fairness to the restaurant, it was really nice. The beef was tender and melty, and the flavour balance good. My cutlet was nice, maybe a tiny bit dry, but I threw it into me along with the fries. Niamh had a veggie pizza, which was less of a roaring success. So, a mixed bag, but a little better than I was expecting. Our flight home was in the early afternoon, so we had to get up at a normal hour and have some breakfast and a stroll before checking out. So where does that leave Venice for me? I think it's a magnificent place, but I get a little sad now when I see people flitting from attraction to attraction, heedless of the fact that their every move is slowly eroding away the stones, the buildings, the culture, and pebble by pebble the history of the place. It seems like there's enormous grab for tick-box experiences in exchange for cash, with the natives slowly being pushed out and into neighbouring Marghera or nearby towns such as Treviso or Padua. What happens when the damage becomes too much? With the Acqua Alta flooding on the rise and footfall set to increase with the potential re-arrival of the cruise ships, the city is in danger of being slowly whittled away. Personally, I found I really enjoyed the quieter zones when we came across them, and dining in areas not particularly frequented by tourists. Where does the crunch point come? Is there a percentage of the buildings which can be sacrificed to keep the tourist dollar coming in? Maybe some Venetians would disagree, but I'd like to see Venice become an actual lived-in city with affordable property pricing, perhaps protected in favour of inhabitants of, say, the Veneto. Turn it back into a functional town. There are very few stores for the inhabitants themselves. More real commerce and less tourist tat is what I'd like to see. Let's see real life amid the sprawling alleyways and the beautiful nooks and the breathtaking bridge junctions on the canals. Maybe, when all is balanced, Venice visits will be limited to not the wealthy few, but the lucky few.